on me, I didn't see you there. I was too busy giving my rat her daily 10 minutes of affection. You see, she has a tendency to experience what is an average room temperature as a below freezing room temperature, so I have to supply her with artificial heat from my body at least once a day. You know, I was gonna change outfits after that bit, but I feel really cool right now, so I think I'm just gonna keep it. Alright, so here's my ish. First of all, as you can see, I've already painted my wall. The deed has been done. No going back now. So, sorry. But that's not the point. The point is, I got bored at some point in time, and in my boredom, I did what is practically a summer ritual for me now. I got an itch to redecorate my room. This time was different. This time I had money, time, and the skill to actually complete it. But that wasn't the only thing that was different this time. This time, I recorded it, which has definitely not happened before. And I have to say, it's much easier to record one single piece of paper for 8 hours straight than it is to record a whole wall for any amount of time, but that's alright. So, I knew that I wanted to paint my wall, but the question was, what do I want to paint it? And to be honest with you, there was no real thought behind this decision, per usual. It was really more just like one of those genius ideas you get only once in a blue moon. Joking. I came up with this idea when I was on a call with a friend, and I realized that I don't have the talent to do a repeated pattern all across my wall, and really that's all that would have fit on it because it's a pretty small wall. So as my friend and I were talking, I looked around the room and I saw my candle. It struck. What can I say? And in that moment, the most genius revelation of the century had been made. I was gonna paint green marble on my wall. So I summoned my mother to go to Lowe's with me because I'm far too socially awkward and inept to go alone. We bought the paint, and the rest is history.
Why do we feel guilt? Let's start with what guilt even is. The definition, according to Google, is feeling responsible or regretful for a perceived offense, real or imaginary. So we'll say that this is our objective definition of guilt. But now I want to think about what guilt is. To do this, I'm going to compare it to empathy. I like to think that guilt is more logical than empathy. You can kind of logic your way out of guilt, but you can't quite do that with empathy. Empathy is a guttural instinct that most people just can't shake. Guilt is also very instinctual, true, but most of the time you can't find a reason for why you have guilt, when the only reason you have empathy is because it's this vague instinct we all have. Let me give you some examples so I don't sound so stupid. We can feel guilt for things that are logically easy not to feel guilty for, like sexual guilt, for example. Some people will find themselves feeling guilty when they first become sexually active because they feel like it's wrong in some way. And logically, there's no reason to feel guilty about that because it's a natural human thing to do. But there are also ways you can unlearn that guilt. And there's no way to unlearn empathy, hopefully. Maybe you can learn to ignore your feelings and numb yourself, but that doesn't mean that you don't still feel empathy in some way. However, the topic I'm supposed to be talking about isn't empathy, it's guilt. So let's get back to that. At what point do we feel guilt? Say there are only two humans to ever exist. Would they kill each other? I genuinely don't think they would, because we all have this basic understanding that other humans are also humans, which means that they have the same feelings and emotions we have. They're three-dimensional, and if we were to kill them, we would feel bad because we ourselves don't want to die. Hopefully. That's an example of guilt and empathy working together, but it's also an example of the most basic form of guilt, separated from society. Because of this, I would like to say that guilt is based in empathy. And in a really basic way, empathy is the emotion behind guilt. Or, if you prefer, guilt is the logic that comes out of empathy. And if you really want to simplify it, you could say that emotions are the basis of logic. Logic is like a trading card franchise, and the cards are our emotions. We're given all these cards through experience, and it's logic's job to make sense of them, figure out which ones are important or worth trading. And you get to collect the cards from other people, but those cards also contribute to your collection, which means that you have to redefine your collection every time that you get a new card. And that's a bit convoluted, I know, but what I'm trying to say is, without emotions, we have no logic. Without emotions, we don't have interactions because we wouldn't have the curiosity or empathy to do so. And interactions are how we make sense of the world. They give us definitions of good and bad and interesting and boring. They give us ethics and guilt. And those are the things that shape our logic. So now that we're done with the theoretical part of this discussion, let's talk about why we feel guilt. We've covered the fact that guilt goes hand in hand with empathy. But why do we feel guilt over so many things that aren't directly connected to empathy? For example, I feel guilty when I'm being unproductive. That doesn't directly affect anyone. Nobody is negatively affected by my being unproductive, so why do I feel guilty about it? A nice, simple way to answer this is society. We really do live in a society. But the reason I feel guilty about not being productive is most likely because I've been inadvertently taught from my childhood that being productive means getting more skills, and that could potentially get me more money, which means more power, which is a good thing. And not being productive is therefore a bad thing. However, being taught things from a young age like that isn't inherently bad. There's a natural progression in society that happens, and that's called creating norms. If we don't have a normal in society, the general public tends to get kind of lost, which makes sense. We have a lot of enticing options for norms. So in order to have this generally understood normal, we develop politics and laws. And both of these things are where this whole guilt thing starts to get out of hand. On paper, politics and laws are good because they give us a general feeling of right and wrong. But when we're told what's right and what's wrong, we start to second guess ourselves because a lot of what we're told is bad isn't actually bad by nature. Of course, I hope we can all agree that murder is bad because of empathy, but why do I have to cover my nipples in public? And why would I feel guilty if I showed my nipples in public? I think I would feel guilty because I'm not allowed to, and I know that it's not socially acceptable. But if I didn't have somebody telling me that it was bad, I would be doing it. We all go around naked as kids because we don't know that it's bad yet. A frequent question asked when you're trying to figure out why we feel guilt is, if you found an invisibility ring, what would you do with it once you became invisible? Or to be more straightforward, if there were no repercussions to your actions, what types of bad things would you do? How corrupt are you, really? And we see a lot of movies, books, and other forms of entertainment play with this idea. But most of them have the same general conclusion, that humans are corrupt and dirty and bad by nature. But the thing is, there would be no bad without societal definition of bad, right? I mean, stealing wouldn't be bad in the early stripped-down forms of humanity because there would be no personal property to steal. We were nomads. We didn't settle and protect our land. And because of this, we didn't have the concept of stealing property. Although we did have food and stuff that I'm sure we didn't want people taking, but you get the point. So to the forms of entertainment that like to chastise me for being a human, I'm not the one that's corrupt. Society is. Thank you very much. I'm tempted to say that we only feel guilt because society tells us that we should, but that's obviously not true because we do have basic forms of guilt. However, we do feel a lot of unspoken guilt that seems to only exist in order to keep us inside of societal norms, which I think is really interesting. And that's the type of thing we hear a lot about with the issues of body image and gender roles and others. But what's really interesting to me is how groups of people can have different morals. And because of that, they have different things that trigger guilt for them. And if these groups are never introduced to morals that are different than their own, they'll never learn that their moral ground is tainted, which can lead us down a deep dark hole of deconstructing how individual our existences are. But I'll save that one for later. For now, this can just be a way for you to start questioning your guilt a bit.
Alright, so there you go. This is my wall now. I did quite a bit more than I expected. I poorly painted my closet and my makeup desk, and then poorly organized it as well. Put up some shelves, and then just absolutely went to town decorating. You know, I have a really loose definition of decoration. All it takes is a $2 fan I got from Savers and an old mirror from Kmart, and I'm set. But as far as the wall goes, I love it. I look at it a lot. And that's what love is, right? Either way, I enjoy it. It really pulls the room together. Uh-oh. Can you tell I have no idea what I'm talking about? I feel like the best part of this wall is it kind of makes me feel like a Hollywood movie star from the 50s. All I need now is a martini glass and a feather-draped robe. Oh goodness, I almost forgot. I'd also need that good old post-war boost in economy and an unbelievable amount of sexism. As I look at the wall while I'm doing typical bedroom activities, an example of which would be watching a YouTube video or drawing, okay? I notice a lot of flaws in this poor thing. Like, the lines on the top of this wall are just all over the place. And there are like splotches of paint in random spots on the wall that it definitely does not need to be in. I really should have prepared myself more before doing it, but I never really prepare, so why would I do it now when I'm about to paint my walls one of the most dark colors on the color spectrum, which are notoriously hard for painting over? No need for that, But moral of the story is, I enjoy it. I enjoyed making it. And you may enjoy making something similar to it as well. So if you ever feel a need to live out your glorious 1950s Hollywood star dreams, this is your one-way ticket. Goodbye now. Oh. Ugh, you're really killing the vibe.